Okay, we're recording. So welcome. Yeah, I think so. That's a fair request. So first thing I'd like to take a look at today is what is the problem. I think this is maybe the most important thing, and I often forget about the importance of this. So let's just take a look together and see what is the problem. So we could think about the problem, but that's not, that's going to go in the wrong direction, because that's you imagine a tree, okay, and you start thinking about it, it starts branching out, right? You've got a lot of possible thoughts about the problem. Okay, so just in case it's not clear what I mean, there's a problem, right? There's a sense there's a problem. Maybe not presently, maybe right now there's not a problem, but in general, there seems to be a problem. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. I'm not that entertaining. If we didn't perceive that there was some kind of problem, we'd be fine. So we perceive there's a problem, and we might think about that problem in different ways at different times, right? So we might consider, sometimes we think, okay, the problem is it's circumstantial. It's due to my finances. It's due to something that somebody said. It's due to something that somebody did. It's due to some mistake I made 25 years ago. It's due to being born in the wrong family. It's due to not getting the right education. It's due to having been exposed to something I shouldn't have been exposed to. It's due to some faulty medical procedure. It's due to my mother didn't love me enough. My mother didn't love me the right way. It's due to poor nutrition. It's due to drugs. It's due to the wrong drugs. It's due to meditation, the wrong meditation, too much meditation, wrong spiritual teacher. Due to not enough exercise, due to the wrong exercise, on and on and on. We think of different things, right? And it depends on the day and the weather and what side of the bed we woke up on. But we think about it in various ways. And you can see, probably in your own lifetime, and certainly looking at other people, you can see people who are 80, 90, 100 years old, maybe. And you can look at them. It's easier sometimes to look at other people. And, and you say, well, they haven't solved it. They haven't figured it out. They're still struggling. So then thinking about it isn't going to, thinking about it is commonplace. That's what people do, right? Everybody's thinking about it. Now, you might think, yeah, but some people think better than other people. Yeah, maybe. But the problem is this, okay? So let's say you're the most intelligent thinker there is. You might be the smartest thinker there is. But you're searching for a needle in a haystack. I like to mix up my metaphors. I like to use a lot of different metaphors, okay? But you're searching for a needle in a haystack. So you might be the smartest person around, But if you, but are you going to be able to think clearly and thoroughly down every possible avenue through every piece of hay? No, obviously not, right? I mean, it's not possible. We look up in the sky. If you can see the stars at night, how many stars are there? Try counting them. How many grains of sand are there on the earth? There's more possibilities for your problem, for the cause of your problem, than there are grains of sand or stars. So you cannot possibly think your way systematically through all of these possibilities. So you might get lucky. That's a possibility, right? Of all the, I would say, functionally infinitely many possibilities, you might happen to land on the one and think your way thoroughly and clearly through it. It's a possibility. Good luck. But I think there's a better way, and it's hard. I should warn you, because it's hard because I think we're restless and fearful. And this approach that I'm going to propose to you for looking at the problem is one that requires patience and a willingness to, I don't know what the right word is, experience, a willingness. It's a willingness to experience whatever it is that you experience, which you can, since you're looking for the problem, you're inquiring into the problem, you can almost be guaranteed it's going to be uncomfortable. Okay, so it's probably going to require patience with discomfort, which is why I think, well, it's one of the reasons why we don't do it very often. But if the suffering gets to be substantial enough, then maybe we're willing to do it because we're kind of on our knees. We say, okay, fine, I'll do it. So you can either choose to look with me now, or at the very least, you can just file this away for when you're on your knees next time. Because it will be useful, because I'm sure, I mean, I'm not sure, but you're probably a bit like me. You probably get to those moments, and then you may not literally get down on your knees, but you're figuratively on your knees to say, please God, what do I have to do? Whatever it is, I need help. Or maybe you're more evolved than that. You don't believe in God, so you wouldn't even say, you wouldn't utter such nonsense, but you whatever, similar, right? Because when you're really desperate, when you're really in pain, that's what I'm talking about. So you could file this away for then, okay, if nothing else. But you might want to take a look with me now if you're willing. Okay. So if you're willing, then let's just take a look at the problem. Okay, so we could think about it, like I said, but let's not think about it for just a moment. Now, inevitably, we're going to have some thoughts. So I'm not proposing that we need to try and struggle. Let's not struggle with the thoughts. Let's not fight against the thoughts and try to get rid of the thoughts and make the thoughts the enemy, but rather let's just not indulge them. So it's like, we're going to stream. It's like we're going to swim upstream, okay? And we want to just we're going to just sort of skillfully do so. So we're going to kind of go, if the thoughts are coming this way, we're going to find the little gaps between them. We're going to slide between. So we're not going to fight with them. And let's just take a look at the problem directly. So notice what lets you know that you have this problem? Or put another way, how would you know if you didn't have a problem? And this is actually so incredibly simple that if you think about it, you're going to overcomplicate it. But just take a look. How would you know if you didn't have a problem? It's not going to be through thinking about it, because you could think about it and convince yourself you have a problem. You'll never be able to convince yourself through thought that you don't have a problem, because thought's always going to say, yeah, but you might. Maybe you just don't know about it. But that's silly, right? I mean, obviously that's silly. You would know if you don't have a problem. Why? Because you wouldn't feel that you had a problem, right? Isn't that true? I mean, you wouldn't feel that you have a problem. So how do you know when you have a problem? You feel that you have a problem. Like I said, I know it's like so incredibly simple and obvious that it's like you think, well, this is stupid. of course, I know I have a problem because I feel like I have a problem. Okay, but apart from the feeling, apart from the feeling that you have a problem, is there anything else that lets you know that you have a problem? I mean, is there any other evidence that you have a problem? I mean, imagine that it's the end of the world, sky is falling, nuclear fallout, everybody around you is dying. This is like bad news. Okay, I'm trying to paint a bad picture. Okay, so imagine this terrible scenario, worst case scenario, but you're unable to feel that there's a problem. So is there a problem? Your skin is melting off of your body. Is there a problem if you don't feel that there's a problem? I say no. You would use the term suffering like I did before. What do you mean by that? You, if you want to speak, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Yeah, if you suffer, you know you have a problem.
Yes, but how do you know that you're suffering? What is suffering then?
It's suffering is easier for me to get to grab to experience than problem, because there are so many different definitions.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is, what is the suffering? What is suffering? What is the actual nature of it? Isn't it a feeling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. So wonderful. So I mean, it's a nice clarification, and it just points to the same thing, which is that so you can translating for yourself. I'm suffering and problem identical in this. Okay, in this case, suffering and problem. But we're not suffering if we're not feeling that we're suffering. If we don't have a felt sense of suffering or problem, then there is no problem, no suffering. There's just what's happening. So why is this important? To me, this is very important because I look at what is it that I don't want to suffer. I don't want to have problems. There are a couple of, there's the common approach. I think common, it seems common to me based on what I've observed. It seems common that people believe that they're going to deal with suffering or deal with problems by outsmarting or using force. They're going to overcome. So they'll be stronger than or smarter than. And that's the strategy. I realize that I'm not that smart nor that strong. You know, maybe every once in a while, smart enough or strong enough for something small. But not that smart and not that strong that I'm going to be able to overcome my problems most of the time. So I realized I have to look at it differently. So that approach, that common approach, I found I'm not even going to say that it is a failure. I'll just say I'm a failure. I am not able to do it. If somebody's able to do it successfully, good for them. Great. I'm not going to go to war with the strategy. If it works for somebody, wonderful. It doesn't work for me, or I'm unable to work it successfully. So I've had to take a look at suffering in a different way. And I realized I need to get really clear on what is it. Because if I realized, as I did, that I'm not strong enough or smart enough to overcome my enemy, then I realized, well, I need to know the enemy. I can't just go to war blindly with my enemy. I have to know my enemy. I have to really discover what is it. And this requires going right into the den of this beast. I have to really get cozy with it and familiar with it and start to actually, that's why I said most people are not going to do this. Because it requires actually getting to know the experience that I have been trying to avoid. That I said was the enemy. That I said was to be defeated at all costs. Defeated or avoided at all costs. So instead, I realized, no, I need to actually understand it. I need to know it. Understand is a good word. I need to understand it. Okay. Why is that a good word? Because if I'm going to understand, so some of you, if you're participating in my somatics training, you've heard me talk about this. It's to understand. It's great. I read this in an Ida Rolf book. Okay. She's spot on with it. To understand is to literally stand under. If you're not standing under, you don't understand. So how do I understand the suffering? Well, I have to fully be it. I have to stand under it. I have to embody it fully. I can't pretend like it's over there. I have to really fully embody it, intimately get to know it. So, as I said, most people are not going to do this because it's uncomfortable. It's really, I mean, I don't, it doesn't have to be. I should say it doesn't have to be, but it just, practically speaking, it is. So so as simple and maybe absurd as it seems, this obvious fact that in order to suffer, I have to feel that I'm suffering is I think, very significant. And so when I further explore this, then now I'm wanting to know, okay, once I see this, then I want to know, well, okay, this seems very true, very obvious, but now I want to know, and this is where it gets more uncomfortable because I have to really get intimate now. Well, but what is the feeling? I mean, really, what is this feeling? Because it's one thing to say, oh, I feel so angry. Or I feel so frightened, or I feel so enraged, or I feel so sad, or I feel so depressed, or I feel whatever. Those are superficial. You don't really understand. If you say I'm depressed, you don't really understand. And somebody is going to be upset about that because they're going to say you don't understand. If you say that, they're going to get all upset because they think that that's very insensitive of me. But what I'm saying is, no, actually, if you are saying I'm depressed, and I'm saying this as somebody who said that, okay, so I'm not I'm not above you. I'm like you. I'm just describing to you my experience that this might shine a light for you on your experience. So when we say I'm depressed or I'm angry, we're stopping short of really understanding because we're not fully embodying. We're keeping a distance. We're still keeping our guard up. We're not really understanding because we're not really knowing what this experience is. Because it's not depression. It's not anger. What does that mean? I say I'm angry and you say you're angry. But what does that mean? How do I know what your anger is? How do you know what my anger is? See, anger is a meaningless statement unless we define it. If we define it really clearly in a way that's reproducible, then it's not meaningless. But otherwise, it's meaningless because I say I'm angry, and what are you then referring to? Well, you're referring to your experience of anger, right? Say, oh, he's angry, just like that time when I was angry. No, you don't know what my experience is. I'm calling the experience anger, but you don't know what the experience is. All you know is what your reference point is. So calling it anger isn't really helpful, not fully true. So what's more helpful, whether we call it anger, depression, sadness, fear, whatever, it doesn't matter, is to actually look for ourselves at what is the actual experience. And here, I'd invite you, if you're willing, just to take a look at whatever your experience is now. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be that you say, oh, I'm angry, I'm depressed, I'm fearful, I'm worried. Whatever your experience is, whatever the feeling is now. It could be bored, tired, happy, whatever. It doesn't matter. Whatever the experience is, take a look right now and really be curious. What is this experience? If you take away the label to fall back on, that it is anger, frustration, boredom, whatever, really get intimate with it. And how can you know this feeling? You're not going to think about it, right? You're going to feel it. And how do you feel it? Sometimes people say, oh, I don't know how to feel my feelings. Well, you, as a human, you feel your feelings through your body, right? I hope that's clear. If you didn't have a body, you wouldn't feel. So I've already given it away. Okay, so what are the feelings? What is this feeling? Isn't the feeling bodily sensations? Say I'm angry. Okay, well, what is that though? It's bodily sensations. There's a particular constellation of sensations and subtle postures that for you means angry. Except that angry also has more baggage with it, right? Because angry also carries with it all the other times in which you thought you were angry. And it becomes its own thing. It's its own entity that now you have to go to war with. Oh my God, I'm angry again. What do I do? But if you take a look, I'm convinced you'll see that there is no anger. So I'm saying this not to get rid. I'm not saying that whatever the experience is goes away. The experience is happening. There's no anger. There's the experience. So anger is at a distance. Anger is like a it's like you package up the experience so that you can't see what's inside, and you just put a label on it. This is anger. Oh, no need to look in there. It's anger. But instead, when we are brought to our knees, then maybe we're motivated finally to open up the package, and we take a look inside by looking directly, feeling directly into the sensations, and realize, oh, this is the experience. So why is this significant? Because to me, I think this is huge. I think this is a very, very big thing. I think this is radical, because when you see this, you see that there is the thing that you think is the problem doesn't exist. You're searching for a thing that doesn't exist. There's a constellation of sensations and subtle postures that you are programmed to create. That's what's happening. You see, that's it. We have been taught that there's something else behind it, that there's some cause behind that we need to find. This is really, really big, because you don't need to go searching for the imagined cause. You don't need to go looking for the story about it, about the circumstances, the events, the people, situations. You don't need to figure that out. You don't need to solve it at that level. That whole thing about, I need to forgive, right? Forgiveness is a big thing. We all know we're supposed to forgive. But how do you forgive? You can't forgive at the level of the story. Forgiveness comes from what? The forgiveness is the present release of the subtle posture of resentment. So resentment has a posture, subtle. But how do you know when you're resentful? You feel it, right? You feel resentful. You feel that you are not forgiving. So the way that we're usually taught is, well, you've got to forgive, you've got to but what is we're not told more than that. So forgiveness becomes meaningless because we don't know what that is. We don't know how to do it. But what I'm proposing is forgiveness is the release of the subtle posture of resentment. That's it. So forgiveness isn't even so much an active thing as it is a release of the posture of resentment. And so it is with all of these things. And I know I'm not certain that I'm being entirely clear about this. I'm doing my best, but this is, to me, this is really revolutionary. I mean, I know I'm not the only one to have noted this. Many people have recognized this, but I'm just saying that in our own lives, this is revolutionary when we recognize this, because it frees us from this whole trip of how we thought we were going to have to solve the problem, which involves a whole lot of thinking and going down so many different pathways, dead ends, exhausting ourselves, trying to get it right. And we were overlooking what is the actual problem. And what I'm proposing is that if you really look, you will see, and you have to look each time, that's the thing about it, but if you really look, you'll see what is the problem. The problem is this feeling. What is the feeling? The feeling is these sensations. What are these? What produces these sensations? It's postures, subtle postures, gestures. Unnecessary effort. Oh, and one more thing, okay, because I think this is very important. I was reading yesterday about the Alexander technique. Yes, I would say a posture requires tension. So the Alexander technique was developed by a man named Alexander. His last name was Alexander. I don't remember his first name. And he was an Australian Shakespearean actor in the, I don't remember now. I think it was very late 1800s or early 1900s, maybe. And he lost his voice, and this was a big deal for him because as an actor, he he couldn't very well act if he couldn't speak. And so he went to all of the specialists everywhere he could. I guess he must have been fairly well off because he traveled to England and saw a bunch of the best specialists there, and nobody was able to help him. And he came back and he was depressed, and then story goes, spontaneously his voice returned, and then it disappeared again. And so he realized, wait a second now. If the voice can disappear and then return and then disappear, I wonder if maybe it's something that I'm doing. So he stood and looked in the mirror and observed himself very, very, very carefully, probably for an incredibly long time. But through this careful observation, he discovered that there was a posture for losing his voice and a posture for a very, not only for regaining his voice, but to have, there was a posture he discovered that allowed him to have a very good voice, a voice that was very resonant and clear and enjoyable to use. And this next point is the point I want to make. He discovered something very interesting, though, which was that the posture in which he would lose his voice was the posture that felt right. The posture in which he had this very clear, confident, resonant, comfortable voice felt wrong. felt wrong, but actually it looked good. So the reason I mention this is because the habitual way in which we react and hold ourselves is what will feel right. And the way that is liberating will probably feel wrong. So that's, I think, an important point. Because when I read that, I said, yes, that's exactly right. when I read that, I was like, yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly how it is. That's exactly what happens, is because I've experienced this many times. That I've spoken about this, that I'll have a sense that I'm in the inquiry. Sometimes it's as if, oh God, I feel like I'm gonna die. I feel like I'm being squeezed. It's so horrible. But that's the posture of release, the posture of alignment, the posture of flow, the posture of liberation. Temporarily, everything, all the conditioning is screaming, this is wrong. You're going to die. Get back to the usual way. Why would that be? So I've observed this. This is, I guess you could say, slightly speculative, but based on my observation. So you can take it for what it's worth. But my observation suggests very strongly to me that the reason is because the conditioning of the restrictive posture, the armored posture, the one that the posture of suffering, is a posture of self-protection. And so that is tightly coupled in the nervous system with safety and a sense that that anything else is not safe. And so this, as it's kind of untangling, there's this temporary experience in which it's still slightly tangled, but in order to untangle that, you have to continue to soften and release. And so there's this intense vulnerability coupled with still this sense of, yeah, but I'm going to be destroyed. I have to protect. So it can create in the nervous system this sense of anguish, pain, terror. And again, probably why most people don't do this. I'll say one more thing and then I'll open it up for questions, which is I have observed, I've observed this tendency toward increasing postures of self-protection, i.e. suffering. I say suffering, it's suffering when it's chronic. I mean, temporarily it's functional. If there's actually danger, it's functional. You know, however many years of evolution have built into the system these mechanisms that have worked, that are functional, right? So when there's an immediate threat, certain postures of self-protection are functional, clearly. You know, if there's a loud sound, what do? Why? We have to assume, because after all of these years of evolution, that is functional. It works. But that is a temporary remedy. It's not a way to live your life. What I've seen, though, my observation is that over time, humans, and I've observed this at least in domesticated animals. I don't know about wild animals because I don't have relationships with wild animals, but I've observed it in domesticated animals too. So domesticated humans and other domesticated animals, I've observed this tendency to hold these patterns chronically, increasingly. And so I see it in when I go to the store and I see people and I notice the way they walk, for example. People tend to become more, as they get older, they're more hunched forward. So these become chronic rather than temporary. So as a temporary thing, it's great. Loud sound, do this. But you don't want to be living your life like that. Because when you live your life like this, then you're living your life with this constant sense of there's something wrong. There's something wrong. It's just like that's your mantra all day long because it's in the body all day long and you're struggling with it all day long. So I said I was only going to say, okay, one more thing. So what is the remedy? The remedy, I think there are a variety of techniques that can be useful as an adjunct to the core remedy. The core remedy, however, is essential, which is awareness. So my proposal is this: just observe your experience. Notice how you are feeling, not what you think about the feeling, not what the feeling is called, not the stories about the feeling, not the other times that you can recall when you felt that way, but the actual direct experience of the sensations and most importantly, the postures, the gestures, the tension, and become really curious about it. No, I mean, really, I think this is, by the way, really fundamentally about how Alexander cured himself was really just through awareness, just I believe sort of obsessively observing his experience and noticing that, yeah, there's a lot of unnecessary effort there. So you start to observe and you'll notice. Observe what you do, for example, in your jaw when you're doing other activities, when you're taking the lid off of something, when you're doing the dishes, when you're lifting something, when you're turning. What are you doing with your jaw? You'll discover that you're doing stuff with your jaw and it's not needed for that activity. So then you can start to be curious about what about your shoulders? What are you doing with your shoulders? And it seems too simple, maybe, or it seems too difficult, maybe, because it seems like, oh, that sounds hard, because it requires a lot of awareness. It absolutely requires the cultivation of tremendous awareness. Really no question about it. So if you're looking for the easy way, whatever that is, I don't know what that way is. I don't think that way exists. I tried that, you know, I mean, we've all tried that. We've tried, you know, all the things. We've tried them. The thing where you go to somebody else and they do something for you, we've tried that. Or the thing where you're supposed to, you know, you get the where the remedy is that you're supposed to just say over and over, I am love, I am love, I am love. It's like, that's nice, but did it work? It could be very, you know, by the way, I'm sure I am love is, it clearly is a much nicer vibration than I hate myself. You can feel it in your body, right? You can feel the difference. So I'm not saying that we should not take advantage of those things, but they're adjuncts to what is fundamental, which is the cultivation of awareness. So I think my experience is observing my direct experience is the core. And I am certain, just absolutely certain, that whatever your problem or problems are, really, no matter what they are, of all kinds, it could be insomnia, it could be financial problems, relationship problems, it could be digestive problems, it could be any kind of problem, any problem. If you observe your experience in this direct way and you just do it over and over and over and over and over, so that it just is a habit, it's just the essence of what you're doing all the time, you will find that that helps more than anything else. Not that you should not do anything else, right? You know, if you take medication, I'm not saying stop taking your medication and just observe your experience. I'm saying take the medication and observe your experience. You can still go to a doctor. You can still go to a financial planner. You can still do, you can still go to do all the, you can still take a yoga class. You can do whatever, but whatever you do, and observe your experience, and just observe to notice the unnecessary effort. And you can count on your brain telling you this is stupid and it's not going to do anything for me. I need something more serious. But after a while, that's why I say just file this away, you know, come back to it. I mean, ideally, don't file it away. Ideally, just do it. but I know most people are not going to do it. So then just at least file it away so that next time you're brought to your knees, check it out. And then keep checking it out. And eventually you will find that every other way is the hard way. This is a challenging way, but it's way easier than every other way. Because every other way requires, well, every other way is just exhausting and it doesn't work. Not really. It works, some of them work a little bit some of the time. But this, when you put this in place, then everything else can work better. So hopefully that was somewhat clear. Now I will open it to questions, and there was, I think, a very reasonable request that we'll try to make room for everybody who has questions. And by the way, if you have a question and you, let's say you've had questions in the past or comments or wanted to say something you didn't, why don't we just give a short space now for the shy among us. so that you can unmute yourself and speak if you would like. And usual caveat applies. This is recording, will go up on YouTube. So if you speak, it will be in the public recording on YouTube.
Joey, may I be that shy one?
Yes.
There's just one little sticking point. I'm entirely with you on the issue of the storytelling and how arbitrary it is to label certain sensations in the body as anger or anxiety or whatever. So that's not really a problem for me. But for me, you're asking me for quite a big jump, it seems, from there to seeing that when you look into those bodily sensations, there's actually nothing there. The knot I feel in the middle somewhere is this, and that is that I seem to be convinced that the problem is unpleasant sensations in my body.
Yeah.
But some weeks ago, I reported to you that I was experiencing unpleasant sensations in my body, and you asked me, what tells you that this is unpleasant? And I have been wrestling with this question for all these weeks now, and I'm still, I can't quite grasp what you're getting at, because my mind somehow seems to convince me that I can tell the difference between pleasant and unpleasant sensations.
Yeah.
And so then I pursue the pleasant and I try to avoid the unpleasant. So that's where I'm feeling stuck.
Yeah. Well, so let me ask you this, which might be a more useful question. So who is producing these sensations? Or what is producing these sensations? How are they coming to be?
It seems that they just arise spontaneously. Sometimes they are caused by certain events, but a lot of the time they just seem to be chronically there, like you know, a chronic unpleasantness. Yeah.
So this is what I'm getting at. Okay. So if we're from the beginning, I said we can think about it, and if you think about it, then sky's the limit on that one, right? I mean, it could be, you say, well, what's producing them? Well, it could be aliens from another dimension, right? It could be past life karma.
Yeah,
it could be nutrient deficiencies. It could be something in the air. It could be, I mean, God knows what. It could be anything. And what are the chances that you're going to land on the correct solution, and that you would then, I mean, it's like, so let's say it's aliens from another dimension. What are you going to do about that? Maybe you need to get some shielding for your house so that they can't get through. But then how do you know which is the right shielding? And you start Googling that, and as kooky as that sounds, I assure you there are at least a dozen websites devoted to differing opinions on how to shield yourself from sensations produced by interdimensional aliens.
Yeah, I'm aware of those.
So that's not, I mean, I hope it's clear that's not the way to go. So what I'm proposing is, let's just look and see, well, what can we actually know for sure, right? I mean, what can we know directly? We can know that these sensations seem to be happening.
Yes.
And we can then observe the sensations directly.
Yes.
Now, if we are persistent in observing the sensations directly, we will become, I'm amazed by this. I really am amazed by it, but it's consistently true that we can become, we can cultivate very subtle awareness of the experiences that we previously thought was impossible. We were not even aware that that was a possibility. That there are, I'm fairly convinced now that a lot of the, for example, the Mahayana Buddhist practices, just as an example, but it's very, it's very codified. Just so using that as an example, that a lot of those practices, I believe, are actually, so they cultivate things like specific inner sounds, the ability to hear certain sounds, to be able to have certain experiences, energetic experiences in the body. And these are experiences that to the average common person say, what is that? That's crazy. That's not real. It's not a real thing. That's crazy. That's science fiction. That's, you guys are all taking drugs or something. But I'm going to take their word for it. For thousands of years, they've been passing this down, and it seems really important to them. And like, hallelujah, I got it. I heard that sound. They get really excited. I'm hearing the sound. That same sound that you promised me I was going to be able to hear, I can hear it. And so what's going on? I'm convinced that through persistent practice and observation, we're able to cultivate certain aspects of the nervous system so that we become aware of subtleties that we are not otherwise aware of. And for its own sake, I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty sure most Buddhists are not going to say, yeah, that hearing the sound in and of itself is awesome and the reason for it. It's just, that's like a road sign. It's just like, that, oh, this is great, I'm in the right direction. Cultivating the nervous system in this particular way, because that cultivation has benefits that are desirable. So what I'm proposing is that where our common average nervous system perceives sensation in a sort of poorly differentiated, poorly observed way. So we're aware of is just this sort of dull awareness of, ugh, I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
With enough observation, direct observation, I'm certain because I've observed it in myself. Okay, we are able to cultivate a subtler awareness so that we can start to actually sort of trace the sensation, and we can become aware of what it is that we are doing. That's basically what this guy Alexander, who I was talking about, that's, I believe, basically what he did. Many people have done this. There are a lot of different variations on this. There's the guy who did the what is it called, autogenic? Is that what it's called? Autogenic training.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of from Taoist practices to modern things where people are connected to biofeedback machines and everything in between, east, west, and every which way. There are people who have landed on this, so it's not it is common to our humanity. Everybody seems to have access to this. Different people have discovered it at different times and in different ways, but fundamentally through just persistent, subtle observation, it takes you to subtler dimensions of awareness that allows you to recognize the subtleties of what's happening. So you say initially that it's just unpleasant. These are unpleasant sensations. Then you say, well, I guess actually I'm not sure how I can know if it's pleasant or unpleasant. I just think it's unpleasant. It just seems unpleasant, but I'm not really sure. So you're starting to look. And then I say, well, take a look and see how do these come about? And in order to do that, so I don't expect that you have the answer to that, because what's required is that you are persistent in the looking. The more you look, the more it cultivates that in the nervous system. So then you gain this finer ability to actually trace the sensation to its source. And then what the outcome of that is, I mean, why that's desirable is then you will start to recognize in your own direct experience that that sensation is not, in fact, it's not produced by interdimensional aliens. It's not produced by, it's actually produced by tension. And that tension, if you continue to cultivate this awareness, becomes something that you can voluntarily release. Because there's something I'm certain of is that the human body is designed such that it's perfectly capable of being completely at ease. And if we experience anything short of ease when we wish to, then what that indicates is that there's a lack of subtle awareness to allow for that ease. Because what happens, I mean, I'm not an expert in these things, but I do know a little bit that when researchers, when they study the brain activity related to motor control, they can see that in a non-differentiated movement or poorly differentiated movement, that there are portions of the brain that are more primitive in their evolution that are being used. They just don't actually have the ability to have finer control. So what that means is a lot of stuff gets kind of glommed together. So that's why I was suggesting, check out what happens with your jaw and with your shoulders when you're doing other activities, because what you'll notice is that when you're taking the lid off the jar, your jaw is tight, your shoulders are tight, you're doing all kinds of stuff, you're holding your breath. Totally unnecessary for the activity. And because we're so generally unaware of that, and because it's not often spoken of in many forums, then we don't really understand the implications of that. But I would say the implications are huge, because we're relying upon, we're operating very inefficiently. We are using a lot of energy that doesn't need to be used. And we are chronically holding postures that are associated in our nervous system with unpleasantness. So that we're stimulating a lot of those, a lot of that programming that's in the nervous system of fear and reactivity and survival because of the postures. So the awareness, back to the brain activity, is then they show that different part of the brain that's more, if you believe in evolution, a later evolved portion of the brain becomes used when we slow down and observe. Then what that allows us to do is have more differentiated movement, and that allows us to release a lot of those patterns, so that when we open the jar, we're doing that efficiently. We're not activating these programs of survival. And so suddenly opening a jar becomes just opening a jar. Instead of, like, if you're like me, opening a jar, sometimes it's like, I want to smash something all of a sudden. It's so angry. It's like, what are you doing? Just opening a jar. But so this portion of the brain that is active when we slow down and observe and learn to differentiate fine motor control also involves greater awareness. Also is going to be, I believe, it's going to be less stimulating to emotional things. So it's going to be less likely to be triggering fear, panic, rage, those sorts of things, which are more primitive, right? Because it's a different part of the nervous system that's involved. So you can train that. It's not a far out thing. It's actually just a thing you can train. So there are a lot of ways, and I think because you're participating in the somatic training, so you know about the 30-day challenge that we're going to be doing, and you said you're interested. So I think you'll discover some of that through those explorations. But one thing that anybody could do, if you're interested in this kind of thing, it's, I think, a very simple thing, is this isn't the only way to do it. I'll just give you one way to do it. So please don't think that this is the one way to do it. But you can lie down on your back, and you can just do this daily, and you could do it in bed. You could do it on the floor. There's advantages and disadvantages to both. But I would suggest doing it, well, I'll give you the general guidelines, okay? Lie down on your back, and then don't move. If you can do it for an hour, that would probably give you the best results. But if you can, any amount of time that you can do it would be useful. And when I say don't move, I want to be clear what I mean about that. I don't mean become rigid. I don't mean hold yourself still. What I mean is don't adjust trying to get comfortable. So you're going to be breathing, obviously. You can have your eyes open or closed. You can blink your eyes. You can swallow. You can, you don't have to be rigid, but don't twiddle your fingers. Don't adjust, trying to get comfortable. Just lie still and rest. And importantly, be present to the experience. Just be very present to the sensations. And you'll notice all of your habits to adjust, to get comfortable, to think about it, to try and figure it out, analyze it, judge it, all these different processes that go on habitually, and you just start to become aware of them. As the more you do it, the subtler this becomes. Also, then what will happen is you'll be becoming aware of these subtleties. Naturally, you'll start to release some of those patterns, and so you'll find that you're able to rest more. Now, at first, for most people, this is going to actually be extremely uncomfortable unless you have a pillow under your head, because most of us have a lot of tension in the back of the neck and upper back. So if you lie down and you find that your chin is sticking up in the air, you're going to need something behind your head. And I would recommend that you'd want to use something that's only the height that you actually need. So, actually with the Alexander technique, they use a variation of this. They have people lie on the floor in what they call a semi-supine position. So that's on the back, but with knees bent, feet on the floor, feet somewhat near to the buttocks, not uncomfortably so, but so that, well, the point being that it's more comfortable. And then elbows on the floor, hands resting on either side of the abdomen, and then they recommend that people will use a stack of thin books. And the purpose of that is that you can then, as the neck and upper back and head release, you can remove books from the stack, and eventually you'll be comfortable on just the head on the floor, but you want to have something under the head to keep it in the right position so that you're comfortable from where you're at now. But these kinds of explorations are really useful. For anybody who's more those two variations, either one of those is very powerful, and I would say I think anybody could benefit from those. And then anybody who wanted to do another variation, I wouldn't recommend doing this variation necessarily in place of those, but in addition to those, another variation is to stand. And so this is a common practice that people do it's a common Taoist practice of standing, but it's kind of a universal human practice of standing. But standing, and they're just standing comfortably upright and standing still, not adjusting. So feet hips width apart, shoulder width apart, parallel, flat on the floor, knees slightly bent, spine lengthened. So usually the suggestion is to imagine there's a string connected to the top of the head that's suspending the head, and then the spine just hangs from there. And shoulders relaxed at the sides, so it's called the Wu Chi practice. But same thing really is through not moving, you become aware of a great deal. It's a very powerful thing for facilitating that awareness. So I wouldn't recommend the standing. I mean, standing for somebody who's not, I would say, if anybody who wants to do the standing should probably keep it to initially do it for no more than 30 seconds. Even if you're very, you think, oh, I'm very athletic, I'm very strong, I can do whatever. Just, it's not about that. It's just about, you want to really cultivate the awareness. It's not about how strong you are. Because the thing is, a lot of the time when we say I'm very strong, well, you're very strong in a inefficient way. So what we're wanting to do is stop fighting so much and stop working so hard, be more efficient, have greater awareness, so that we have a recognition of what is actually happening. If I'm feeling sensations, and I say, oh, that's an unpleasant sensation. Do I want that to be the end of it? Just, oh, there's that unpleasant sensation again. No, I want to have sufficient awareness so that I can trace that and I can recognize exactly what I'm doing. Because, point being, I'm generating my own dis-ease. If I'm not at ease, I'm generating it. So if some, whatever the imagined cause is, it doesn't matter what the cause is. And that's fairly, I think that's fairly radical. It doesn't matter what the cause is. I'm causing it. I'm doing it. Now, whether or not we can yet take action on that is another thing. I'm not proposing that we all are able yet to take action on that, but I think it's a very significant point, and I've made this point before, that, for example, contagious illness, infectious illness, what causes the symptoms? You do. It's the body's own immune system that produces symptoms. So this can really be, in theory, if somebody has sufficient subtlety of awareness, this is something that applies across the board, I'm convinced. So whether we say it's an infectious illness, or it's a nutritional thing, or it's stress from work, or relationship stress, or financial stress, or whatever the case. I mean, even those well, same group actually. It's the Mahayana Buddhists, who, I think it's the Mahayana Buddhists who have the Tummo practice of the inner fire, and so they sit in the cold. It's so even what we think of as weather and temperature conditions that we think invariably produce certain reactions in the human. In fact, it turns out that's not true. The stimulus will commonly produce that reaction, but it's not invariable. It depends upon the individual and what they've practiced and what they have available to them. Point being, all of those changes are changes that take place within the body, and whose body is it? Is yours, and you can, through sufficient awareness, you can. It's not about doing more; it's actually about doing less. With sufficient awareness, you can not do the things that you feel compelled to do. Just another thing about that. So for example, shivering. Okay, so just because I brought up cold, shivering is a mechanism for producing heat. But it's fairly, I think it's fairly well known. It's sort of mainstream science thing. There's something called what is it called? Non-shivering thermogenesis. And it's people who are into cold exposure. Those people who do the ice baths and things like that. It's desirable from their perspective. It's desirable to have non-shivering thermogenesis. So if they're shivering, that's not what they're after. They're after the production of heat that does not require shivering. Why? Because shivering is not very efficient, right? I mean, you're using a lot of energy. So if you're trying to stay warm and you're using all of this energy trying to stay warm, that's not very efficient. So I think non-shivering thermogenesis is much more efficient. And they propose, I think, that it has all kinds of other benefits. I'm sure they'll say it's anti-inflammatory and blah, 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 blah. Who cares? But point being that by having the awareness and cultivating the awareness of how you shiver, if you were interested in this kind of thing, you could learn, how do I shiver? How do I not shiver? If you don't shiver, then presumably your body will just switch over to non-shivering thermogenesis. And I think this is why the people who do the Wim Hof method, and they're one subgroup of the people who do the ice baths. They claim that they become very hot. I think that's the point of Tumo also, it's the inner fire. So the inner heat to become very hot from within. So we have a lot more potential than we are normally aware of, normally think that is available to us. And I don't think that any of those other techniques are absolutely required. I think the breathing techniques and the particular visualization techniques and all those different techniques, I don't think they're strictly required. I think that they are sometimes helpful adjuncts, but I think fundamentally it's an awareness game. And so something as simple, this is the thing, is people usually want something that's more dramatic. They don't want the simple thing. But I think honestly something as simple as just lying still and observing your experience. I mean, I test this out. I do it, and I find it's fascinating. It's just fascinating. The things that I become aware of I'm not regular about it, but when I do it, I wish I was more regular about it, because it's fascinating. Just lying there, and it's very powerful, really, really powerful, because so many of the things, lying on the back I've experienced at least, that just lying on the back can produce panic. It doesn't matter about closing the eyes. Whatever is more comfortable and whatever is more likely to help you stay awake. But why would it produce panic? Well, according to what I'm suggesting, and my observation is what leads me to say this, what produces panic is because panic is only a posture. And so it reveals that posture of panic, that it just reveals that posture. It just puts pressure on the body in a certain way that the usual habits, because most of us have this head forward posture. I mean, it's not usually that exaggerated, but we have head forward posture. And so we've got a lot of tension in the shoulders, back, neck, and throat. And when we're lying on the back, particularly without adequate support under the head, if you need the support, then you don't want to produce big experiences. You want to be well supported, so it's small experiences. But the only time I've experienced the sort of panic is when not having adequate support under the head. But it can reveal that chronic tension in the throat in particular, which is a fairly vulnerable area. I mean, I think it's programmed into the organism to have a lot of intensity anytime there's any kind of sense of restriction in the throat. And so that position can reveal that tension in the throat. And but the good news is, through that awareness, then we can learn to cease making that unnecessary effort, and our lives become nicer. Was that clarifying? Do you have,
Yes, thank you very much. Much clearer now. Thank you, Joe.
okay. Do you have any other questions about that?
And very, very nice, very helpful techniques as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nothing else. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. The main thing is make sure you're, just like I said, make sure you're adequately supported when you're lying, if you're going to do it, so that you don't. It should be, mild discomfort is fine and probably desirable because it's going to give you something to explore, but it should be only mild. You don't want to, you want to be mostly within comfort. And the aim is to move toward greater comfort and ease. So if you start with, and you probably aren't going to have this problem, but just for anybody else, because I know we live in a fairly macho culture. So for anybody who is considering doing this, just keep in mind that you will get much better results if you stay as close to comfort as possible. You don't want it to be like, you don't want to necessarily aim to set yourself up. It's not like you're trying to get into a sensory deprivation state. So you don't want to like get so comfortable that you're not feeling anything, but you want to, at the same time, you don't have the mindset that more discomfort is going to be better and that you're going to push through that and that's going to give you faster results, because it's not true. You want to, because if you're pushing yourself into a state of panic, your nervous system is going to have a lot harder time calming down. And so you want to just play with the edge, because you know that you've got chronic tension. And so you don't want to try to totally avoid that. You want to feel into that. You want to become more sensitive and aware, but you want to do so in a way that is just playing with the edge of discomfort, not into too much discomfort, because that will push you into stress. So you want to just play with that edge. So you feel the sensations, you can explore, but it's just on the edge of comfort.
Beautiful. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, good.
Hi, Joey.
Hi.
Can I just clarify something about that, please, about the lying down?
Yeah.
At present, I'm having a lot of sensations from my pelvis that are going down my legs.
Yeah.
That are not comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so that happens sitting and lying down. So when I go to lie down in bed, those sensations are going down my legs. And I sometimes stay on my back and allow myself to ease into that if I can. Sometimes I don't. And I try and find some comfort on the side.
Yeah.
Is it harmful to stay in that position if it's hurting quite a lot?
I would say,
if I'm trying to let go all the time, keep letting go and ease.
I would say that there's the general advice that I just gave a moment ago, I think is applicable, which is that you want to feel the sensations, but you don't want to push yourself into a stress response. So what I would recommend is try variations. So you could try the variation with the knees bent so that they're.
I have done that.
Yeah, and
Yeah, actually, if I can turn onto my stomach, last night, that was the only place that I actually found some relief. But it's not a position I can sleep in, really.
Yeah, this is a great question, because I'm sure there are other people who are going to find this, because restless leg is a common thing.
And that, yeah.
So it's a great question, because what I would say is that based on my experience, so I think that those sensations are, I can say with a fair degree of confidence, they're going to be related to chronic tension in the pelvic muscles, and it's just complicated in there. There's a lot of muscles in there, and they move in all these different directions, right? So it's not some of those you can access more easily when you're lying in one position versus another. So I would recommend in general trying to find, if somebody wanted to do the practice of lying on the back that I was suggesting, then find a way to do it that's comfortable. If you can't find a way to do it that's comfortable, then don't do it. Because if it's going to be pushing you into a stress response, it's not going to work very well. So you can try different variations. You can try with pillows or cushions under the knees. That can sometimes be helpful. And if none of those variations work, then what you can do instead is you could try. Well, it'd be a little challenging for me to explain right now, but I'll explain it. I'll give you some variations in the somatic training of things that you can explore. But I'm hesitant to give general advice to other people right now on that. All I'll say about it is, if somebody finds that it's too uncomfortable to lie on their back, then don't do it. If you can't find a way to do it with accommodations or adjustments that make it comfortable enough, so we all have to judge for ourselves what's going to be acceptable for us. And I would say that some people err on the side of accepting too little discomfort, and they would do well to accept a little bit more because it will give them more to explore. Some people err on the other, and they accept too much discomfort, and then they're just living in a stress response all the time, and that's not really very helpful. So I think kind of goes back to that usual advice of know thyself. I think is helpful. You have to really know what's your tendency. If you tend to try to push through pain and discomfort, then probably you need to do less and give yourself more ease and comfort to work from. On the other hand, if you're somebody who anytime there's any discomfort, you just try to avoid it, then maybe it would be best to just slow down and have a little bit more patience with it. Just see what you can allow and explore without it pushing you into a stress response.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Particularly because on doing the transformative breathing and the breathing practices, I find them a lot better on my back if I'm, say, doing it in the morning after waking up or going to bed. But if I'm in this uncomfortable state, that's difficult to stay laid on my back for that.
Yeah. I'm glad you bring it up. I do have some recommendations that can be helpful, and I can give those to you elsewhere. I just don't want to try to give that as general recommendations here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Joy, if no one has something, I want to.
Okay.
So about the sensations, when I do let go, I do have the underlying sense of like all the time. It's not so. The moment you said about the thing that you told about when I see my posture and what's running everything, what's running is this posture, this tension that extends whatever suffering. But when I let go, there's this underlying still like emotions, and I feel like I feel that probably all throughout the day. It's not like, but it's not like I'm suffering anymore. I'm just clarifying the fact that I'm just feeling them all the time, even though like I don't feel like I'm suffering.
Right.
So do you still think I'm holding back from the posture? Because I don't seem like there's a real threat. There's a real problem now. Although I'm like accepted the fact that they'll be there.
Well, I would say that it's a huge, absolutely huge positive improvement. I mean, so then the question is, there's no ultimate right or wrong. It's up to you. It's what you prefer, and if you're satisfied with that, then I think that's fine. If you're dissatisfied with that, then what I can suggest is that more careful observation will help to shift that. I want to be clear that I'm not proposing that we're necessarily ever going to well, I'm not sure exactly what to say about that, other than just that if you carefully observe, then what will happen is that that will shift, because things will start to organize at a higher level. And what I mean by that is that presently the functioning in the nervous system is less optimal. I can know that that's true because of what you're describing. I'm not, I don't have a judgment about that. I'm just, that's why I said it's up to you. If you find that satisfactory, that's great. There's no problem. But if you feel dissatisfied with it, then I'm just letting you know that it is possible for that to organize at a higher level, so that you're not feeling burdened by it. So for example, well, I think what I was describing earlier, you're opening a jar, okay, and if you're opening the jar and you're satisfied with your experience of opening a jar, who's to tell you that there's a problem? There's no problem. It's great. But if you start to realize, well, actually, I'm not so satisfied with my experience of opening the jar. Every time I open the jar, I feel sort of upset. So then you can start to take a look, and you can observe, and you can realize, well, every time I open a jar, I'm scrunching up my face and I'm holding my breath. So that's interesting. That's not actually necessary. So then as you observe that, then what you can do, you just slow it down. You just say, okay, you get a jar and you prepare to open the jar, and you set the intention to open the jar, and you just start to observe before you actually start to open it. You just observe how, before you even start to open it, just the intention to open it, you're already starting to scrunch your face, hold your breath. Okay, so just don't do that, right? You're just sort of learning what your habit is, and you're just releasing that habit so that you can just learn to just open the jar. So you just start to learn just to open the jar while you're breathing without scrunching up your face. And so you can do that with anything. So any experience that's happening, if you slow it down and you observe and you see what unnecessary effort you're making, then you can optimize the experience. You can organize at a higher level so it becomes more efficient. So if you're, is there a specific example of something that is, or I mean, you said it's general, it's happening all the time, but is there anything?
So right now it's like, obviously, like I've seen that it's more mental now, like because I've seen like when I the tension thing, the releasing, the letting go happens like in the split second whenever I get aware, and it's just
Yeah.
like mental thing of me looking at my experience. That's where I'm at. I feel like I'm not too tensed up. Like
Yeah.
when I first started out, I was not aware. I don't know if you remember, but there was no awareness at all. Like I thought this is just bullshit and there's no tension because I don't see it.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
This guy is
Right.
telling
So
me
this is,
this
yeah.
tension.
So that's why I'm saying so in a similar way, and this is true for all of us, there's always more that we don't presently see just because so you can refer to that experience where you remember that you thought, oh, there's no tension, but then you realized through observing, oh, there is. And in the same way, now you say, well, there's no more tension, there's no more unnecessary effort. Well, but there is, and I can tell you what it is it's the unnecessary effort that holds together the whatever it is whatever the story is that bothers you. And it's a subtle story. I'm not, but if you just, this subtle thing that says there's something wrong, there's some effort still involved that holds that together in your experience. And if you just observe, I mean, if you just many times throughout the day, if you just stop, and just observe, you'll notice you're holding your breath. You're maybe holding some tension in your forehead. You're doing something that's not needed. And so you can just start to increasingly become aware of that if you want. I mean, like I said, it's not that you must, but if you feel dissatisfied.
I'd like to say though, like the most, I remember you saying, forget about everything else, just release the tension in the forehead. That's, that has been like the game changer.
Yeah.
Because before I was not even aware of anything, but once I was like, oh, I don't know how I got awareness of that too. It was just an accident, I guess. I don't know. Oh, this is where it is. That really simplified things. Yeah. Whenever there's anything, at least I could see, okay, this is where it's at. I'm pretty sure. I would say like 100% of the time, not even 99%, there's always tension here.
Yeah.
There's always tension. It's like always. But my tension goes right to the forehead. I just let go. And I'm realizing there's a subtle tension in my feet now. And my back, chest, and my heart, especially of my, like, the girl that I dated left me. I see like this whole, this, I don't know, this, I was trying to hold this together with her, and I couldn't let go. And so I feel like this tension in my heart.
Yeah.
And that period was I've never experienced love before, but when I first experienced it, and I didn't know, like, the chemicals were just, my brain was just all over the place, and I wasn't acting out of consciousness. It was just through my, only now I can see all of those patterns. It's just like, are not aware of it until it happens, and it goes, and now you look back.
So that's it. I mean, if you just observe, you'll just see that. I think, everybody's going to be a little different, I suppose, but if I would say, You know, the forehead, you got a lot from that. So in addition to that, I would say the next thing to notice is holding your breath. You just check that out. You'll notice that you're holding your breath a lot. And if you're not holding your breath, you know, you have to make effort to hold your breath. Otherwise, the body just breathes naturally. So if you cease to hold your breath, then that frees up an awful lot of unnecessary effort. So just check that out.
Yeah.
You know, every time you remember to do so, just throughout the day, just check it out. Am I holding my breath? Can I let that go? And see what that does.
Do you have time for one more?
Actually, no.
Okay, all right.
My wife and kids are going to use the car in a few minutes, so I got to wrap it up.
All right.
Yep. All right. Thank you, everybody. See you next time. Bye for now.